Welcome to our Gordon Food Service 2021 Spring Food Show. I am Sharon Carter, and I'll be presenting today with my fellow dietitian and NRC manager, Amy Gautrad. Our webinar title is Waste Not, Reduced Waste to Manage Costs. As we progress through this webinar today, you'll see it's not just about managing costs. It's also about helping people, helping the environment, and each of us joining in to do our part in this important trend. Our objectives today include the following. We want to raise your awareness of the immense impact of food waste, help you identify training strategies to increase staff buy-in to reduce food waste, and then challenge you to select 2 action steps to start reducing waste in your food service operation. So why is food waste a focus today? Food loss is a big issue in the United States. Food loss costs the U.S. a staggering $218 billion per year. Food waste is a subcategory of food loss. Food loss is the bigger category, and it includes all edible food that goes uneaten at any stage. Food waste is a specific piece of food loss, and it's defined as food discarded by retailers due to color or appearance, and plate waste by consumers. So food waste includes the half-eaten meal left on the plate at a school, food scraps from preparing a large kettle of homemade soup at a hospital, and the sour milk poured down the drain at a nursing home. And now there are 2 categories of food waste. The pre-consumer food waste is that before food service waste, food that's thrown out due to spoilage or expiration. It could be an overabundance of trimmings from produce or overproduction of menu items. And then post-consumer waste is the after-meal service plate waste that is behavior influenced. It's controlled by our patrons and guests. So here's the big question. Is food loss decreasing due to the pandemic? Yes or no? The global pandemic has increased food loss because of the disruption to the global food supply chains. Border restrictions have slowed, even stopped, the flow of food from the farm to the distributor. Lockdowns and people getting sick has slowed or prevented harvests, also hindering food transport. Food loss has increased as farmers had to resort to dumping large amounts of perishables. And at the same time, people in urban centers have been and still are struggling to access fresh food. Interestingly, though, not too long before the pandemic, in October of 2018, the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Food and Drug Administration started working together on their Winning on Reducing Food Waste initiative. This is a collaborative interagency effort to work together in order to achieve reduced food waste on every level, from commercial to household and across all sectors, including commercial, healthcare, and education. The EPA, USDA, and FDA are seeking to bring education and change to all of us that will impact us in our local communities, so together we can reduce food waste. So what is the level of the U.S. food waste? Food loss and food waste accounts for the largest share of our municipal solid waste at 21.9%. It's estimated between 30 and 40% of available food in the USA is wasted every year. Wasted food means wasted water. And recent studies indicate 20% of the water that's used to grow our food is wasted because of the large amounts of food we throw away. If food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, after China and the United States. This quote emphasizes that optimal usage of food and supplies brings better health to all. Nothing gets wasted in nature. The more society mimics nature in recycling, the better off we will all be in terms of living healthy lives on this planet. What a priority that is right now. I believe this. If you and I both believe it, then we can join together to make a difference because our beliefs form the basis for our actions. So what do the stats mean to you and to me? When we reduce food waste, we're better able to feed people, feed animals, create healthy soil and air. And our resources that are not wasted can be put to good use. Amy will now present our first strategy, Know Your People.
Thanks, Sharon. Sharon talked quite a bit about why the topic of waste reduction is so important. And we know the best way to achieve a goal or make progress with an initiative is by having the support around you. When a food service operation is focused on a certain goal or initiative, such as reducing waste, it is important to understand how your employees and your guests play a role in achieving that goal. Simply put, it's important to know your people. Starting with your employees, it is ideal to consider the following. Think about experience. Does all of your staff have previous food service experience? If so, is that experience in a setting similar to your own? For example, someone coming from the restaurant world may not have had much of a focus on food waste previously. Also, think about the skill level. Think about the expertise of certain skills and the impact that can have on the amount of waste an operation generates. Identify where there are training opportunities and make that a focus for your team. For example, in the healthcare setting, it may be capturing residents' orders accurately and based on preferences, which would help reduce waste. In the K-12 setting, really consider having a student-influenced menu. And then all food service operations can benefit from knife skills and the impact on waste from produce, as Sharon will discuss more. I'd also encourage you to think about leadership potential. It's important to not only know your people, but also grow your people. Think about who has leadership potential and get them on board to help advocate or educate on the importance of reducing waste. Additionally, in order to help get their support, allow your team to understand the why. Help them understand the why and also the impact it can create. This can make it even more meaningful. For example, you may choose to share some of the following. You may have heard about the milk waste that occurred during earlier phases of COVID, with major purchasers of milk closed, such as schools, coffee shops, and bakeries. The dairy industry quickly had an abundance of milk on its hands, but cows still needed to be milked. Yet, there was not that same demand to purchase a supply. Images of milk being dumped were commonly seen, and not everyone saw solutions for how to manage this abundance. Highlighting how the significant waste occurred across the food industry and the supply chain may help your employees better understand exactly why your organization is choosing to focus on it. Or, if you're operating a hospital food service department, you may choose to share about the financial impact that affected hospitals and relate that back to how every department has to focus on controlling costs in order to help the hospital as a whole. The American Hospital Association estimated that during March to June, hospitals and healthcare systems experienced a loss of over $202 billion. This was based on canceled services, additional costs associated with PPE, additional support being provided to employees, and the impact of revenue overall, which could include hospital retail food service, which in many cases may have been closed. Additionally, hospital retail food service volumes were reported to decline anywhere from 17 to 75%. So I'd encourage you to take the time to understand specifically how your retail revenue was impacted and share that with your team. Illustrate how important it is to control food costs with managing food waste as a top strategy. I'd really encourage you to think outside the box, specifically when you communicate. Some operations are very large with huge teams, a variety of shift and schedules. It can be really challenging to pull everyone together and ensure they are hearing a consistent message. A unique way to do that is to create a QR code And this would link back to all that pertinent information, and it would ensure a consistent message. Let's listen to how this strategy was successful for one of our education customers, Catherine and Jennifer, with Elvin Independent School District.
We did send out for the families who are coming to our curbside to pick up their meals. I created like a QR code on a sheet of paper that we had our managers hand out with each meal that was picked up. And it just said, "We want your feedback. Please take this survey." It directed them to a survey where we asked, you know, logistical questions like, does this time work best for you? Do you enjoy the bulk food? Do you prefer prepackaged food? Is there anything else you'd like to see on the menu? It saves on a lot of money for printing as well. I mean, you hand them a small sheet of paper versus a packet of 6 sheets of paper, and it's a lot less time consuming, it takes up less space, and it's less expensive.
That was such a unique idea that Catherine and Jennifer implemented. Not only is it important to share your goals and your initiatives with your team, but in some examples, it may make sense to share this with your customers as well. It can be especially helpful to explain your goals when it results in changes to the menu. For example, a school may have shifted from a very large menu with lots of stations, bars, and choices, but keeping all these options during COVID and even in the near future may result in additional waste. Take the time to explain that the change is temporary and that the school is focused on reducing waste while of course still ensuring that students' nutritional needs are met. In the college and university setting, you may have students who are concerned about sustainability or environmental issues. Sharing that your food service operation is focused on reducing waste may resonate with some of your students and may be meaningful to them. Some of your guests may really connect with your vision and goals and then may feel good about supporting your operation. So depending on your customer base, think about what would connect with that group. For example, this poster here, created by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, is a really creative visual that may work well to reinforce the message with younger students. Another way to consider communicating, if appropriate for your customer base, is to consider things like social media or even a visual display. Think about how a visual display representing the amount of waste could really resonate with your guests. It would definitely be impactful. And also, don't discount the potential impact you can make just by sharing this goal with your customers. In fact, Gordon Food Service featured a customer success story where fifth graders in Ohio led the initiative to focus on reducing waste from foam plates. So truly, you never know who you may inspire. And now I'm going to pass it back to Sharon to start diving into some actionable items.
Thanks, Amy, for presenting the strategy. Know your people, staff, and customers. That's a very important starting point in making changes. Now, let's investigate some further strategies to help you build your plan. Next up, we're going to hear an industry and a customer's perspective from two individuals. First up, we have Amanda Goldman. Amanda is the healthcare industry sales strategist for Gordon Food Service. Her wealth of experience as an operator and an RD gives a broad perspective on food waste. Additionally, we will hear from Jody DeFrancesco, who is the Assistant Director of Nutrition Services from Pasadena ISD Independent School District.
Hello, my name is Amanda Goldman, and I'm an operator and a registered dietitian by background. I am happy to be here today to present with my colleagues Amy and Sharon on this important topic. I know that it's no surprise that food waste continues to be a top trend in our industry. A few years back, the National Restaurant Association shared this list of trends, including locally sourced food, environmental sustainability, healthful meals for children, natural foods, farm branded foods, and food waste reduction and management. Now, of course, for 2021, we're seeing plant-based foods, functional foods, meal kits, virtual cooking classes, delivery services, and eco-conscious packaging. Fortunately, we're still seeing a goal to reduce overall food waste as a priority. So now let's talk about food waste management and some things to consider regarding reducing pre- and post-consumer waste, especially in the area of healthcare food service. Be mindful of all items on your menu. You may not be offering the food choices that your residents and/or patients prefer, resulting in a perceived lack of variety. Meal selections maybe were not accurate at the point of service. Your guests do not always follow their diet order, resulting in wasted meals. Are there food quality issues at hand, or are there other items that are not hot enough or cold enough? Maybe the portions are too large, or maybe there was not enough time for them to finish their meal. What's the environment like? Maybe there is poor patient room or dining room atmosphere, such as cleanliness or lack thereof, temperature issues, or lighting issues. Also, there could be a loss of appetite related to the clinical diagnosis of that particular individual and/or medications that somebody may be taking. Now let's focus a bit more on menu planning that is designed to decrease food waste. Some questions to consider and think about. Are the right choices on your menu? Are you getting feedback from your guests via surveys and/or resident councils? Do your menus reflect their favorites? Are you aware of resident or patient preferences? And again, is there enough variety? Do your menus feature seasonal items and a variety of produce? How are your serving sizes? Are they too large? And maybe your portion sizes clearly are not identified on your production sheets for your staff. So that's something to consider as well if you need to update those. Does your staff need a refresher training on proper portioning? And lastly, are your diets liberalized? Less restrictive diets are often accepted better, as we know, both in acute care as well as senior living settings. And do you have a small portions diet that's offered to your guests? Now let's look at some other considerations to decrease food waste. Such creative solutions include rotating leftovers into your resident or retail menus via soups, daily chef offerings, or even fun snacks. Simplify your menu. Reduce the number of SKUs of the overall items. Ensure cross-utilization of menu items, and use the chef daily special from today as tomorrow's alternate meal option. Incorporate into employee appreciation opportunities such as special meals, snacks, take-home kits, and desserts. Use smaller amounts of items that are left over to transform them into a unique treat and give them to your employees, to somebody that's gone above and beyond. Ultimately, you simply need to think about and determine if the right choices are represented well on your menu. I hope that I provided you with some good insight and some innovative ways to decrease the amount of food waste in your overall food service operation.
Going into the school year, as we transitioned from a hybrid model of learning, transitioned to a hybrid model of learning, we decided to go with a very simplified menu this year to help reduce food waste. For example, we reduced our high school theme lines down from 4 themes with 1 cycle to 2 themes with 2 cycles. So what that did was it helped us to still offer all of the student favorites, but it also allowed us to distance the high school students across multiple serving lines. And with fewer choices each day, our staff could better plan for minimal waste across the theme lines. We also temporarily paused a few of our really labor-intensive dishes. We bake our own taco shells for our taco salads, and so I've temporarily removed that from the menu. We felt like doing something like removing really labor-intensive items would help ease the stress on kitchens that may be experiencing unexpected short staffing, and it would also allow us to easily transition to classroom meals if the district plan required that at any given time.
These menu and serving ideas presented by Amanda and Jody are simple, yet so easy to overlook. I'd like to emphasize several of them. Know your customer. K through 12 customer Becky Landes of Manchester Schools says the number one most important thing, especially during COVID feeding, is knowing your customer base. Know what they like. Your resources are too valuable to make food customers won't eat. She does surveys and asks the kids what they like to eat. She is routinely in the lunchrooms to hear what the kids are saying and is willing to change the menu to accommodate the trends. For example, she heard kids talking about Panda Express, so she built a menu including tangerine chicken, cupped orange sauce, commodity broccoli, and a fortune cookie. College and university head pastry chef from Illinois State says, I think trying to forecast ahead is about the most influential factor to reduce food waste. Are you using tools like accurate production records that give you insight regarding what your customers really like and will choose? Knowing your customer in healthcare settings, such as long-term care, may mean serving smaller portions. You work hard to create a menu that meets preferences and regulations. But if your customers don't eat the food, it does them no good. When residents ask you for smaller portions, do you comply with their request? After all, resident choice must be honored. We write a small portions diet for our cycle menu management menus. If you use CMM and don't have a small portions diet on your menu, consider adding it. If you need guidance on writing a small portions diet, we would be happy to help. Contact us at our email address, nrc@gfs.com. Are you optimizing cross-utilization of products? Let's look at the humble, boneless, skinless chicken breast. We have about 75 recipes in our menu software, CMM, for the one item 268127. Take a look at the variety in just a few options: apple raisin stuffed chicken, Russian chicken, Southwest Cobb salad, chicken nuggets, chicken fajitas, and chicken teriyaki. Look at these statistics on global food loss per year. It's roughly 30% for cereals, 20% for oilseeds, meat, and dairy, and 35% for fish. Produce is a top category in food waste. Fruits and vegetables, plus roots and tubers, have the highest wastage rates of any food, with 45% food loss. Our number one strategy for managing produce waste is to improve the knife skills of your kitchen staff. You can create your own training using your knowledge, online resources, and YouTube, or provide professional training, such as a formal online cooking class tailored specifically to cooks in long-term care, Pineapple Academy. Or to bring your culinary service to the next level, take a look at Ruby. Ruby is an online culinary training program that provides the first step in achieving chef status. Both Ruby and Pineapple Academy are professional service vendors vetted by GFS to provide added value to our customers. Use our Gordon Food Service training topics. These are free to all GFS customers on Gordon Experience. If advanced training for your staff is not an option, then consider using value-added produce that comes ready to serve as another alternative to reducing food waste. Another solution that falls into the preparation strategy, but also beyond, is LeanPath. LeanPath is another professional service vendor with Gordon Food Service. The LeanPath Food Waste Prevention Platform is a hardware, software, and customer success program that allows kitchens to identify the root causes of their food waste. With that insight, LeanPath then guides teams to target food waste with automated goal setting, instant alerts, and in-depth reporting. There have been some really impressive results with LeanPath, including a 50% reduction in food waste and 2 to 8% reduction in food purchasing cost. And then, moving on to another strategy, challenge the status quo and rethink old standards. You know, we have said, if in doubt, throw it out. How about removing the doubt before throwing it out? Be informed about expiration dates and document handling procedures. We may need to rethink salad bars that went away during COVID. Will they come back? Maybe, maybe not. How can you maximize the appeal so customers want salad, and for schools, can you make it a reimbursable meal? Here is an example from one of our customers showing how she challenged the status quo to reduce food waste. Becky Landis made salads attractive to customers, and she made each one a reimbursable meal.
We had a salad bar and it was quite expensive. And I wondered, how are we going to be able to grab that group of students and staff, because it was an important part of our lunch. And so we now make prepackaged salads, and we use an 8-inch square hinged with hinged lid container, and it's clear all the way around. You can see everything that's in it. So we use really pretty tomatoes. When we need tomatoes, they're less whole, so there's less prep on that. We use the red and the purple and the green as a specialty mix that we get from TFS. And 25% of our kids and students and adults eat salad every day.
Oh,
that is more salad than we did when we had the extensive salad bar.
these are pictures of the salads Becky was just talking about. Look for composting opportunities in your local area by doing an internet search. Just type in commercial composting and your town. See what stewardship opportunities are out there you didn't even know about. When I did this for Grand Rapids, Michigan, I expected to see residential and commercial opportunities, but I was surprised to see event composting. So if you have a large corporate event or a wedding, a company can be hired to take the food scraps for composting. The larger your organization, the more of a contribution you can make to your community partners. Consider new connections to reduce your food waste being sent to landfills. Use that as a last resort among these 6 options. Source reduction, buying and producing only what you need. Feed hungry people by donating to your community partners. Send food scraps to feed animals. Consider industrial partners who can use food scraps to create fertilizer and energy. Composting will create healthy, rich soil for growing more produce. And the last option of all is sending food to a landfill. Identify your community partners and build your relationships. Have you thought about putting your community partners in the same text message or email and letting them know when you have perishables you won't be able to use quickly enough, such as right before Christmas break or after an open house event? Then let them respond to your first come, first served message to schedule a pickup. Gordon Food Service values community partnership and donated 7.3 million pounds of food in 2019. So these strategies we've presented, knowing your people, staff, and customers, menu, serving, and preparation strategies, and challenging the status quo are all meant to give you fuel to start your action plan. Now we'll switch over to Amy. She has a lot to contribute on strategies for reducing supply waste.
Thanks, Sharon. Beyond the methods to reduce food waste that Sharon discussed, there also is a significant opportunity to reduce the waste that is associated with supplies. Since supplies is an incredibly broad category, for the sake of this presentation, we are going to focus on supplies such as takeout containers, packaging, napkins, paper towels, and plastic utensils. Part of the reason we are focusing our attention there is because of the shift in demand for these items in response to the pandemic. But do keep in mind that the supplies we mention are just one piece of that supply puzzle. This is a good starting place, and we know that sometimes getting started can be the most difficult step. The International Solid Waste Association estimates that the consumption of single-use plastic may have grown anywhere between 250 and 300% in America since the coronavirus pandemic began. When you hear stats like this, and then also look at what Gordon Food Service experienced during the pandemic, it really does make sense. Here are 2 graphs that compare the Gordon Food Service sales of foamed takeout hinged containers in education and healthcare. The blue line is representing the current year, with current actually being 2020, and the orange line is representing last year, 2019. In both examples, there is a significant increase in 2020, which was notable for much of the year. Cutlery is definitely a contributor to that stat regarding the increase in single-use plastics. On the healthcare side, the graph on the right, you can easily identify that significantly more kits were purchased by healthcare accounts from March to year end. However, on the education side, it's interesting. The cutlery kits were more popular March to May last year. So this may have been related to the fact that perhaps schools did not yet implement feeding programs, or because many students were eating at home, schools may not have been supplying plastic utensils, which is actually a great strategy to reduce supply cost. We know in many situations you may not be able to get away from using these supplies completely, but our goal is to give you some different ideas to consider that may impact how often you use them, when you use them, and the choices you make as it relates to these types of supplies. One of the first steps in making progress is understanding your baseline. If you measure it, you can improve it. Make sure you take the time to first learn how much you are spending on certain supplies, and additionally, how much you are using in a week's time frame, for example. Once your baseline is established, you are truly ready to begin. Consider these 4 basic rules as noted here. Do it, analyze it, act on it, repeat it. It truly is an ongoing cycle. But that cycle is important to focus on. According to the Argentum survey of certified directors of assisted living, the cost of disposable dining supplies ranked number 2 when asked to rank their top dining concerns from 2020. We know it is of significant concern, yet we know thinking of strategies to reduce supply costs or waste generated from supplies can definitely be daunting. As you measure and assess or evaluate, it is also important to share and discuss these action steps. It's important not to face this challenge alone. Be sure to get others involved. Earlier, we talked about knowing your team and looking for that leadership potential. This is a perfect time to put that into practice. Employees may appreciate hearing the perspective of a coworker versus a manager or a director for a change. Consider identifying a waste warrior or a champion on your team who can help share why it is important, the impact, and how every person plays a role. After learning a little bit more about your baseline with those supplies, it is important to pause and ask yourself, what do my guests expect from me? Am I taking the time to truly understand what they need to enjoy their meal? I know personally during COVID, as we tried to support many local restaurants through takeout, we quickly accumulated a small drawer full of plastic utensils. Since we were eating at home, nowhere else to go, we really just didn't have a need for these. I keep thinking they'll come in handy during a summer picnic or something, but it's truly just not necessary. So I'd really encourage you to think about that service model. Is it students at home with remote learning? Or independent living residents who may have small kitchens or kitchenettes? Or college students living off campus in small apartments? Or skilled nursing residents who are dining in their rooms? Perhaps for those first 3 options, certain supplies would not be necessary and could end up being discarded in the trash. So take the time to survey and ask these questions. It may result in cost savings for you and less waste in the landfill. And there are multiple ways to survey your guests in order to get quality feedback to guide your decisions. You could use a Google survey form, there's SurveyMonkey. You could simply ensure that your guests have your email address and encourage them to send feedback at any time. Or you could use the QR code method that we talked about earlier and link that QR code to a survey. Or the lost art of having a conversation. You could simply talk to them during meal pickup or when taking their meal selections. Obtain that feedback and use that to make a decision. Understand the guidance. Understanding this guidance can be an important tool in developing your policies surrounding these types of supplies. A policy may then have the outcome of reduced purchases for certain supplies. So of course we now know that the main route of transmission for the coronavirus is respiratory droplets or small particles, which are then inhaled in the nose, mouth, airways, or lungs of another, causing an infection. One topic that has come up, especially in the healthcare world, which has a significant impact on supply use, is the debate between the use of reusable dishware or disposable dishware. So when we look at the guidance from the CDC and their isolation precautions, it is acceptable to reuse dinnerware as that combination of hot water and detergents is sufficient to decontaminate dishware and eating utensils, which means no additional precautions are needed as long as you are following proper policy and procedure as it relates to warewashing. Furthermore, the CDC notes that the management of laundry and food service utensils should be performed in accordance with routine procedures. However, as always, follow your own policies that are in place and make decisions based on various circumstances, which may include staffing challenges. Additionally, when looking at the guidance for more of a retail type dining environment, which may be more common in that college or university setting, According to FDA's best practices for retail food stores, it is noted that you should verify your warewashing machines are operating at required wash and rinse temperatures with the appropriate detergents and sanitizers. However, it does not specifically address a requirement of disposables or not. So, in short, review the guidance available and work with your team, key stakeholders, or your interdisciplinary team to develop a policy that is safe and feasible for all involved. Alternatively, be sure you understand and follow your current policies in place, as there are many factors that play a role in policy development beyond some of the examples previously mentioned. And now we are going to hear from Rob Zurcher with Pactiv to learn a little bit more about the choices we have and some considerations that may help drive those choices.
Thanks, Amy. Today we're going to talk about some sustainability drivers from the packaging side of things. So, what is driving sustainability these days? Well, there's really four things: legislators, NGOs, consumers, and media. Legislators, what do I mean by that? Well, it's an expansion in the terms of materials and products, but also geography. There's increased concerns about regulators, chemicals used in packaging, etc. NGOs, environmental groups with effective tactics that are pressuring producers of big brands, particularly publicly held companies and their board of directors. Consumers, packaging is increasingly seen as very wasteful. Consumers want companies to take responsibility for their products. And media. Social media is spreading myths, oftentimes through YouTube and such platforms as that. Traditional media tries to keep up and often repeats and regurgitates many of these stories. Did you know that food service packaging accounts for less than 2% of materials in the landfill? As Amy mentioned in one of her previous slides, food itself is 22%. Food packaging is only 2% of that, but there are many steps we can take to correct that and fix it and get better with it. Here's some of those opportunities that we have. So one thing we want to look at today is bans don't really change the behaviors of people. A study done in San Francisco in 2008 after they banned foam containers, they showed that cups made out of foam were reduced in litter by 36%. But you know what happened? They switched to paper cups and that litter went up by 36%. So what does that tell you? That tells you we have a people problem, we have a litter problem, and it's more driven by consumers, and we need to really fix that. According to Keep America Beautiful, 75% of litter is human behavior. They chose to do that. I recently was participating in an event, and I came to a crosswalk to walk to a convention center to give a webinar much like this. And as I did, I saw a mother standing there with two small children. Their backpacks were on. She gave each of them a piece of gum before she sent them off to school. And what did she do? The kids dropped their wrappers right on the sidewalk. And I was astonished. And I wanted to say something, but I didn't. Little behaviors like this, people don't even realize what they're doing, and it happens every day, and you're going to see it all over the place. So what's next? A growing number of cities and food service operations are looking to change this consumer behavior. We have to require reusables instead of single-use items. That's just one example of things that we can do to fix that. So, what are your customers' preferred sustainability attributes? This is a key thing that you need to capture from your clientele so that you know what direction to take this. We have 4 R's at Pactiv Evergreen that we really focus on: reduce, reuse, recycle, and renew. So let's just get into each of those just for a minute here to kind of talk about what those are. So reducing is using less virgin materials. How do we do that? Well, you may not know, but your clear PET cups from Gordon Food Service are actually made from recycled content, so that way it's using post-consumer products. That's an example of reduce. Reuse. Sometimes we can use reusable type containers. Gordon Food Service stocks a container that is made from polypropylene that is almost like a Tupperware type material. So once you send it away with your customer, although you don't control it once it leaves that point of contact at your facility, chances are they're going to wash that and reuse it for leftovers in the future. That's a great example of reuse. Recyclable or recycle. Recycled content. It includes recycled materials and helps the manufacturer work to divert some of those materials from the landfill. Recyclable means can be collected, processed, and recovered. This depends on municipalities' waste management facilities and restrictive definitions. And lastly, let's talk about renew. Renewable. This includes materials made from trees or plants that provide an alternative to petroleum-based materials. We also can talk about, in that renew category, compostable. Compostable is something that can be collected, commercially processed, and recovered and made into compost. So which sustainable option is best for your customers? Well, that just depends. And those are the questions you have to ask, and you need to ask your Gordon Food Service representative or many of their suppliers that can help give you these answers of which way your consumers may want to go. So let's talk about an environmental claims refresher. Did you know that just because a material is recyclable, that doesn't mean that that product is going to be recycled? This is really a lot of question that people have out there, and that is not going to happen unless your local facility is participating in collecting that. So when you see the codes on the bottom of a package, oftentimes 1 through 7 for different types of plastic materials, that is not a recycling code, that's a material code. So it's always a good idea to check with your local source to see if they're actually recycling food service packaging. How am I supposed to know what is what? Ask your municipality what they recycle and or compost. If you have an in-store recycling or composting bin, then you need to really manage that waste and know where it's going and how it's being handled. Also, you can ask your packaging supplier for help and information. For instance, ask about the standards or the certifications. So if the product is not registered as compostable, it will not compost, and that can create issues. Some products are often certified by a third party, like Biodegradable Products Institute. That way you know the product you're purchasing can be composted and will get done. Products can be put through real-world facility testing like Cedar Grove, and then we can know for certain that they will be either recyclable or compostable. Let's talk about some green packaging suggestions. Offer straws only upon request. Offer cutlery upon request. I had a recent experience where I ordered from a food delivery service, and I was shocked and amazed to look at the ordering platform and see that they had a box. Would you like a disposable plate? Would you like cutlery? Would you like napkins? Well, this product was being delivered to my house. I would prefer to use real china, real silverware, and my own napkins. Use products that are made from renewable or recycled content. You control that. 60% of consumers want recyclable or recycled content when they buy products from your facility. This is very important because when products leave your facility, you have no control over that. This is something you control. So we really recommend that you find out what's important to your customers and you buy products that are fitting to that need. Use products that your customers can recycle and or compost. But you don't control that unless you're offering it in store. So that is a good point to remember. Researchers expect compostable packaging to continue to become bigger and bigger. This is a double-digit growth industry year after year since 2016. How do you communicate green packaging strategies? Well, recently a study showed that 75% of consumers in all walks of life indicate that it's important or very important that food service locations that they visit use sustainable practices. 61% say they don't even know which restaurants are committed to these initiatives, but they're really striving to find out. What can you do to help? Communicate what you're doing. Print it on your menus. If you're a facility that's a non-commercial facility, put it on your table tents. Put it on your website. Provide window clings, placards, table tents. You need to shout out what you're doing so people know that you're doing it. Make sure that you're using accurate and appropriate environmental marketing claims. You have to be careful to make sure you have the correct information before you state it on any printed material. Also, educate and train your staff on the actions that you and your facility are taking, because it's very important that your staff can relay these wonderful steps that you've taken as a facility. And finally, just talk to your customers. Tell them what you're doing and work with your local Gordon Food Service rep as they can assist you in getting this message out to your customer.
Thanks, Rob. Rob definitely provided a lot of information to consider when thinking about the types of supplies that make the most sense for your operation and for your customers. So, as we come to an end, we are going to leave you with a challenge. We recognize that this past year has been a challenging year for many, and food service teams, managers, and directors are no exception. We think it's important to remember the impact you have on your students, your residents, or your guests. Even if you don't hear this appreciation every day, it's there. I love this quick clip from Catherine and Jennifer.
Recently, we started handing out meals on Fridays for kids for Saturday and Sunday. And our high school told us a story. The manager was handing out the meals to the kids as they were leaving for the day. And the kid got the meal and then he turned back around and told the manager, "Miss, this is going to help us so much. Thank you." And you hear something like that and you go, wow, that was worth it. Like, was it fun to put together the menu and to scramble and to find things and to do all that stuff? No, but you hear a story like that and you go, one kid was helped, it's worth it. And you know that there's a whole bunch more exactly like that, that it was worth it for. Like, they're not going to go hungry over the weekend. And that breaks my heart to think that there are kids out there that would go hungry if we didn't do this. So there's definite value in what we're doing.
Another thing we were reminded of from our customers and during some of the strategies is the positive impact a supportive team can have. While we know this year has been challenging, it's important to reflect on all that you have accomplished and keep moving forward. So, we leave you with a challenge. Yes, another one. To think through 2 action steps that can apply to your operation based on the strategies that we talked about today. And if you're still in survival mode and not quite ready to commit to 2 action steps, well, then we just encourage you to keep learning and educating yourself on the topic of kitchen waste. The Gordon Food Service Idea Center has many articles on this topic. Additionally, we have a podcast featuring Lean Path, and we have Gordon Food Service training topics to support you, which Sharon mentioned earlier. As you make decisions about supplies, these are great booths to visit to learn a little bit more. Also, be sure to visit the It's Your Business booth. And as a reminder, this webinar qualifies for 1 continuing education credit as applied through the Nursing Home Administrators Board, the Association of Nutrition and Food Service Professionals, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the American Culinary Federation, and the School Nutrition Association. Visit the It's Your Business booth to fill out a webinar evaluation form and obtain your continuing education certificate. Additionally, if you're watching at a different time, then there will be a link to the evaluation form near the webinar link itself. While you're at the booth, be sure to check out some of our other resources, such as the food service training topics, which Sharon mentioned earlier. We greatly appreciate your time today, and we hope that this webinar has been incredibly helpful. Thank you.